So yeah, we'll just get into talking about the movie because we're all pumped about this, and also we we all have stuff going on.
Welcome to Certain POVs, Another Pass podcast with Case and Sam, where we take another look at movies that we find fascinating but flawed. Let's see how we could have fixed them.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to Another Pass podcast. I'm Case Aiken, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host Sam Alisea.
Hi.
And today we are once again graced by one of the various geeklies that I've met through all the convention scene. We've got Mike Urban here.
Hi, I'm Mike. Nice to meet you. If I haven't met you before,
Mike, it's great to get you on. We've known each other for several years now. Since at GeeklyCon, the first one I went to, I was wearing a certain POV shirt, specifically a Scruffy Nerf Herders one. It's a slap shirt, and you thought it was funny, and you came up and you gave me a ticket for the point system that was going on there.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we've been talking ever since.
Yeah.
Good to see you at all these GeeklyCon events and just all the stuff that you're doing out there in the world.
Yeah, it was so great to see you in person again after obviously for various reasons that who can say we weren't able to all meet in person for a couple of years. This past summer was great to reconnect with everyone.
Oh yeah. It was so good, and it was that just the right amount of people where everybody felt comfortable, everybody was being kind to each other, and assessing their risks. And I'm a bit of I just want people to be nice to each other, and I love that. So
it was a good place for everyone to come out of their shells, you might say.
Yeah.
Which is a great lead into the movie that we're talking about today, because today we are talking about the 1991 classic Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles II, The Secret of the Ooze.
Cowabunga!
Oh, I want to put you on a joke timeout so much, but go on.
Oh, I mean, it's been a while. So I used to do a podcast called Sacred Cows Tonight. It's on hiatus. I couldn't say it's hiatus because that would indicate that I intend on coming back at some point, but I don't know. Whenever I come back to the podcasting world, because I've been busy with a little bit of life things, it'll probably be something slightly different. But anyway, no, I saw that you all wanted to talk about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, and I'm like, heck yeah, let's talk about that. I love that movie, or I think I did. So...
Yeah, this had been on our list for a while. We talked about Turtles 3 very early on in the show's history. And that's infamously the one that's the one people didn't like as much. Turtle Power, Turtle Fever, whatever you want to call it, had started to die down a bit. The effects studio that was doing their costumes changed, and you can tell. you can tell. And in fact, I'm very angry with Amazon or whomever decided that now if you go to try to buy this online, the cover art for both Turtles 1 and 2 uses the character models from 3.
Oh.
And it just feels mean because Turtles 2, whatever you think about it, continues the tradition of Jim Henson Studios doing these amazing turtle costumes.
Yeah. And honestly, Splinter looks amazing too. I remember, when it started and I was watching this, and of course, it's been several years since I've seen this movie, even though I was really excited. I was like, yes, let's do this. And then also a little bit of me was like, oh my God, is this going to ruin my childhood? Is this going to not hold up? There's always a little fear there. But even the Turtles looked great. But when I saw Splinter, I was like, oh, right. He looks amazing. You can really tell who's behind. I was like, this is the good stuff. Practical effects. Love it.
Yeah, I was reading about the practical effects between this one and the first one, where the conversation was about the willing suspension of disbelief that goes on with their costume designs. The turtles don't look like real turtles or real turtle, anthropomorphized by way of mutation kind of thing. They don't look real.
Right.
But they look appropriate for the setting that they're in. They fit, and we're here for it because they look right. More so than looking real.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what I really appreciate about that is the small details, that they did. With the first one, I really, everything felt grimy and dirty, and the turtles felt wet, and they live in a sewer, and all the small details and yes, they're not real, but it helps with all those things to suspend that disbelief. including to in the first movie, the turtle battle damage, their bruising and things like that. There isn't so much of that in this movie because of the change in tone, but still, I mean, the level of details and the level of quality that they put in these so that these martial artist actors in the suits could actually do all their cool stuff while having all of this going on. It blew my mind.
Yeah, I mean, the character work, like the design work, is a big part of why the first movie actually was one of our 5th episodes, where we talked about all the hurdles behind going into it, because, it was an indie movie that, while yes, it was being built on a franchise that was becoming an explosive popularity like phenomenon at the time when the movie was greenlit, it wasn't there yet, and it's incredible that they got that movie together, and then it was such a huge hit. It held the record for most popular best largest box office indie movie until Blair Witch. And that's pretty crazy that you could make a movie quite that big from this weird little thing that started off as a sketch, like making fun of like X-Men and like Daredevil stuff. But it was so successful that they immediately rushed a second movie into production, and that was Turtles 2. It's coming out, I think, 11 months after the first one, so it's a really tight turnaround on getting this movie together and getting it into theaters, which, that's going to create some challenges for you when you are working with a special effects heavy, or at the very least like animatronic heavy property like this. But that said, the design work continuing from Henson looks fantastic. Looking at Raphael, for example, I kept like admiring how he has like a very scarred shell, like his back shell. It has slashes all over it, and I'm not sure if that was his design throughout all of the first movie, or if it happens when he gets beaten up really badly in the first movie, or if it's only for this movie. But if it's a nod to the fact that he got really horribly injured in the first movie, that's a cool thing. Like that's a nice design detail, and none of the other turtles have it.
I didn't even think about that. That's a good notice.
Yeah, I also love that there's like clear like freckles and dark spots and things. Like it just makes them feel so real. It really lends that artistic, like, oh wow, like, oh there's like a couple of like little freckles on Donatello's shoulder, and you can kind of see that in this moment. Yeah,
they all look different. Is really nice. And it's not just their faces have like little differences. Every part of the outfit has something that's individualized.
Yeah, that's what I was going to actually mention too. Is I felt like with these turtles, I could tell the difference between them without looking at their headbands. If their headbands came off for a scene or something like that, if they decided to make that choice, I feel like I could still say, okay, that's Raphael, that's Donatello, that's Michelangelo, because of how different they made the faces look, the shapes, the freckles, all of those things.
Yeah, like really incredible work. And like honestly, looking at this movie where there is a very different tone, there is a very different ethos going into like what this movie is versus the first one. One thing I really noticed is that the saturation is much higher in this movie. Like the first one's very washed out, and you can really see it when you like look at their headbands. Like the red for Raphael pops in a way that it just didn't in the first movie. Like all the colors in general are just like way, like I said, like the hue is just like cranked way up.
Yeah. I think that went along with the tone shift, right? Because like everything in this movie is, they're not in the sewer anymore. So like, I guess maybe the dampness is not wearing out the clothes, and, and like everything's a little bit brighter, and the sets are a little bit brighter, and, so I think that also goes along with just like the tone change of the film. Yeah.
It felt like a lot of the places they were fighting and things like that, like they're fighting inside of a little tiny, mini mall and things like that. Those choices they made so they can have the turtles be much more jokey and things like that. So the brightness of the humor, the brightness of the sets, the brightness of the turtles. Yeah, it all goes together.
And I mean, it makes sense. Like, there's a big turnover in terms of the production staff. Like, Steve Barron did not continue onto this movie after the first one. So it's Michael Pressman, who is mostly known for doing TV work, especially TV movies. So there's a lot of even TV lighting in a lot of scenes. Like the areas where there's like more dramatic lighting, it's usually additional stuff, like the lights in the mini mall at the beginning or when they're at the concert. But you very rarely have like dark shadows really delineating any of the scenes that they're in. Even scenes that are like outside and it's dark usually are very well lit because it's New York. Like when they're in the rooftop looking at the canister for the first time, it's very rare that you have harsh shadows like actually obscuring anything on this, which was pretty common in the first movie. So it's just a very this feels more like a TV thing, and I know that the one of the notes from the producers is they wanted this to be more like the cartoon, and that's all part of going into that process. Another way that that taking that note and putting it into like being more like the cartoon. If you notice, the turtles, they've all got their weapons and things like that, but very rarely do they actually use them on the bad guys. Whereas in the first movie, they were actually, fighting with the weapons. These were more like the weapons are extra props for us to do different ninja kicks and things like that. So
yeah, they use the weapons, but they use the weapons more for leverage. Like Donatello stabs the ceiling and then uses it to disappear, according to him, and then he kicks someone from the ceiling. So stuff like that, where it's a little more not fully slapsticky because there is still martial arts behind it, but there's a lot more humorous moments in their battles.
Yeah, but it is definitely toned down. Like the big note was like, less attacking people with weapons. I'm not sure if I even see Raph's sai at any point in this movie, which is just a purely stabbing weapon. So what are you going to do with it aside from disarm someone? Maybe like that wouldn't already be like kind of rough on kids. Like in the first movie, Leonardo had several spots where he like goes for like a real swipe at someone with the sword. Like usually there's a duck or an avoidance or a block, but like if he had connected, he would have just like taken a foot soldier's head off. And like those are humans; they're not robots like in the show. And in this, it's none of that. Like and they're. So, like, weirdly, this gets into the whole thing where, like, the worst weapon is also the one that parents are most afraid of, and also legitimately could hurt the kids the most, which is the nunchucks.
Oh, yeah.
Parents groups, especially in the UK, really objected to nunchucks in use. And as a result, like, they weren't really allowed to use it at all. There's only one scene where someone actually like wields them around, and that's actually April O'Neil when like Kino finds it. And there's a fake out scene earlier where he takes sausages that are like linked together and uses them as if they were nunchucks. And that was cut in the UK.
It was cut.
Really?
I did not know
that's a shame, because the series of puns that comes from that scene are fantastic. They're wonderful.
Yeah. Combat cold cuts.
The missing link.
All of that. Yeah. Gold.
And
gold.
next time I'll use mustard.
I'm so sorry to those people in the UK that didn't get to see that.
Well, the Blu-ray put the scene back in. But
good.
Is mustard some kind of an insult in the UK? I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Oh, the silly Americans talking about mustard. Yeah, I mean, the whole ethos was to make this like a more family-friendly movie. Like, it's very similar, and we talked about this movie specifically when we talked about Ghostbusters 2, where by the time the sequel rolled out, there was a cartoon that had a big popularity, and it was very popular with kids. Like, the original Ninja Turtles comics, being a parody of, like, Frank Miller stuff, is dark and grim and has a lot of, like, violent kind of undertones to it. And the movie picked up from that, and the TV show went its own way. And then you get this movie where they're trying to, like, have two masters. Like, they're trying to appeal to the previous movie, but at the same time, make it more like this cartoon. And so all those weapons, they're not used. We get things like, the Foot Clan are way less effective in this movie. And part of that is that their numbers have been decimated. But, like, there's some really obvious shots where there's just like a bunch of them standing in the background being like, hey, yeah, we're going to come at you eventually.
That was one of the things that this rewatch for me was like, wait a second. So you've got like Tatsu, and actually in one scene, even the Shredder just like standing there with their arms folded, and Tatsu's like, and there's nothing, they're not doing anything. Like if they actually all fought the turtles, they might have actually had a chance, but they're just standing and watching and like, oh, yep, he's going to get kicked, whatever.
Yep.
It's a totally different thing. Whereas I think the first movie, I felt like there wasn't any time where there were big bad guys just standing there doing nothing. So,
no, I mean, I don't think they ever really fight Tatsu in the first one, and then Shredder obviously whoops their ass at the end of the movie so badly that Splinter has to actually step in. So, yeah, it's rare where you have someone kind of like looking on, but then you also constantly have shots of like a whole bunch of the Foot just standing there, and then they leap into action and like, okay, finally we're getting into this all. Like, that was a like This movie shares a lot of beats with the first movie. Like Raph goes off and like gets captured on his own kind of situation. Kurt's the same way as what kind of happens in the first one. But in that one, it's like, how do you expect to beat me? And then it's like, good answer when he's like completely surrounded.
Better joke. Yes.
Right. And then they cut to him already being like out because of course, like, weirdly, the first movie, the conservation of ninjutsu rule, while it kind of is in play, it like is avoided at a few spots, and that's one of those spots. The conservation of ninjutsu rule is a trope meme that exists on the internet of like, if you have a lot of ninjas, you'll beat their ass, and if you have one ninja, that you can't win. Because the ninjutsu spread too thin. And this movie is definitely going on with that, because every time there's like a big fight, everyone's fine. like it's like, They come at you one at a time. Raphael is able to just like kind of dance around the fight. It's just nowhere near as intense, and the stakes aren't there. Like they'll capture him, they're not going to kill him, which was kind of the implication of the first movie. They're like actively trying to cut their heads off with axes while the building is burning down. No, this is just a junkyard. We're just going to beat you up and then tie you up. Like different stakes.
Yeah, the other difference, and I think part of this, it's an interesting commentary on the movie by the movie, is Splinter is really on the Turtles like the whole time about like, hey, were you seen? Were you seen? Were you seen? And this whole movie, the Turtles are basically like, nah, we weren't seen, but they were totally not trying to not be seen. Whereas in the first movie, there was the whole the whole idea of actually being stealthy and things like that. They were trying to do that in the first movie. In the second movie, it's like, okay, well, we know the kids just want big bad action and things like that. So I feel like that was a bit of the writers going like, listen, really ninjas should be trying to be like on the down low, but no, Splinter's going to make a comment about that, and that's what we're going to get. So
yeah, I think it's too like it's really fun because I think they like basically were like, we're going to do this just for the joke at the very end, with Splinter being like, oh, really? Work harder. Holding up that newspaper, showing that they've been seen. Like, I feel like the writer was like, this is going to be great. But I also feel like because of this, the Turtles learned nothing this entire movie.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, well, like, that's my biggest note on this movie, which is none of them have arcs.
They don't have arcs. Like they do. Like, they're not even mildly suspicious that Raphael has gone missing. Considering what happened the last time, you'd think they'd be a tiny bit more worried. And I know he's a hothead. I know he goes for walks. But he hasn't come back and no one's heard from him. And last movie, he kind of got his ass kicked. So, like, maybe you guys would be, like, a little more alarmed. There's just, like, small things where, like, it's just, like, we're here to have fun. Like, don't get me wrong. I smiled from beginning to end rewatching this, partially because just nostalgia. Like, I was like, I don't know if I can actually watch this objectively. Like, I am enjoying all of the terrible puns. I am enjoying all of the slapstick action. I am ridiculously a child right now, and I don't really care and almost have no notes. But I do, right? Because, like, they don't really learn a lesson at all. And in fact, they lie to Master Splinter. And they're like, nope, not seen at all. You guys did a dance break with Vanilla Ice. What are you guys talking about?
Oh, no, but that was okay because, they didn't know they weren't in costumes. People thought they were in costumes, right? The Turtles could have sold it that way. They're not that smart. Definitely. They're teenagers.
I mean, that's what April's there for, right? But
right, spin the news. And I mean, like, Vanilla Ice rolled with it pretty well, too. So, like, all of a sudden they're doing a musical number. Everyone there was like, these costumes, I love this place.
Yeah. Honestly, I will say, as problematic as he is, that song's still a bop.
Oh, yeah.
Still a bop.
Yeah.
Ninja Rap was great.
Go Ninja, go. I really, my favorite part of that scene is where the promoter is like, oh my God, who are the extras? We got to call the cops. And then that some stuff happens and they come back to that guy later. No, they love it. What are you thinking? Why are you calling the cops?
And his assistant is like on the phone. I finally got the cops. No, why are you calling the cops? They love it. Poor guy.
Yeah. And rewatching this, I was thinking about, so this movie ties in really well with the world of the Ninja Turtles properties at the time. the whole bit with Vanilla Ice and the way like Shredder shows up and all of that is exactly what they would then do the following summer with the Out of Their Shell tour, which I realized was also promoted on Oprah, and they talk about Oprah earlier in the movie.
Yeah.
I didn't put that together. I completely forgot about the Out of Their Shell tour being on Oprah. I have that
Yeah,
tape.
like they did like a whole yeah. Yeah, it's wild, and it's so crazy looking at this property at this time and then like putting the pieces together of like, oh yeah, okay, so this is the marketing pushes that were going on. Here's all the things that they were trying to make sure worked because of this larger franchise that this one movie just was a part of, as opposed to pushing like the movie being the thing.
Yeah. How much of a jerk is Raphael, really? Like,
Huge.
April's on TV, and he's just like, let's change the channel. I'm like, come on, bro. Support your friend.
Yeah, that seemed a bit of a pivot right there, because like he was the one that was like into her in the first movie. I mean, they're all into her in like in that weird like horny teenager way. But it like he was her like white knight, and in this one he's playing up more the rude part of the cool but rude dynamic that Raphael embodies.
Yeah, absolutely. It was really weird. I was like, what? Why is he like? And then like it kept cutting away from us hearing what was on the news, which kind of felt like important things to the plot. Like we got afterwards, right? That stuff was going on with the with this particular company and like the scientists and things like that, because like Splinter, and then we had the next scene with the scientists, but like that was kind of important information for all of the characters. And instead we get Raphael just being like, we need to change this. Like, what about Oprah? I was like, it's such a weird decision.
You're living in the house rent free. Come on. Jeez.
Right.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I did appreciate how that was all framed up with the TGRI and I have to say the prop work for the giant dandelions and everything like that. So you knew what was going on and things after Raph had interrupted was excellent.
Yeah, so the dandelions I think are really good detail in terms of like setting up like, oh cool, like the mutagen is this strong that it can make this tiny little weed into something so big. I thought was really cool detail. But it's also one where it would be subtle enough that like someone might overlook it. If they're just like walking by, they may not pay attention to like, what is that big flower? Like, oh, it's this thing that we are all intimately familiar with because it's just a very common weed in the United States. So like, I thought that was a cool detail there and of like how they were setting it up. And it was like nice to be like, yeah, all right. You can see how this like this flower is this like tip off of potential power for Shredder. And I liked the kid that the Foot Clan sneaks into.
Yeah. I thought that was really great because you actually have him. He's actually one of the few people that has a line in the Foot Clan meetup at the junkyard. So he runs in and he's like, is this it? So you get like a good shot of his face. You hear his voice, that kind of thing. And he interacts and like, you know, kind of, so we understand, like we've seen this face. This is very good because this is for kids, right? So we're like, oh yeah, that guy. So when he appears again and he's talking to April and he kind of asks her a slightly suspicious question about what follow-up questions she would ask the scientist. And she's just like, don't worry, I get paid to be nosy, and walks away from him. You know that he's actually there to follow her. Oh no. And then he finds it and he actually confirms from you that it is the dandelion. Mm-hmm. Like he verbalizes it. He sniffs it and he goes, dandelion? So like you like further know because you know something's wrong because the scientists run over and like, oh my God, what are we going to do? But then he also goes there. And then you know, because you know that he's from the Foot Clan because you've seen him before and you know he's following April. You know that he's going to take this information to Shredder. Oh no. It's great. Wonderful tension.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I like the cut to that scene with Shredder where he's like, I told you to follow her. And like, but Master, this is even better. Like, yeah. I like it where it's just like, yeah, Shredder is like very much this totalitarian controller who like doesn't want anyone to interrupt him, but is not dumb enough that he would get mad for someone like obviously capitalizing on an opportunity.
Right. Yeah. Does that make him a good leader? I think it does.
I mean, I think it does. Like,
Are we...
like, the Shredder was effective until the turtle showed up.
The virtues of Shredder.
I mean, he He's good at making speeches, as we saw in the first one.
That's true.
He's good at delegating because basically, he comes up with the big ideas, and then he has Tatsu do it, who also delegates things. And then, of course, Tatsu, whips people into line because he's like the best person at raging ever. So,
and listen, we know from the first movie that he's also good at recruitment.
True.
He is good at recruitment.
And pushing cigarettes. Anyway.
Yep.
Well, I mean, you get Sam Rockwell to do that.
That's true.
So let's talk about the actual Ooze part, like the Ooze plot, since we're on that note right there. So I think it's introduced really well. I love the scene where we get where we get David Warner as like the professor. Like, I think that like him like babbling while it's like, oh, we're live is like a really nice introduction there. April is wearing this like it's not a jumpsuit, but it's like this like pantsuit combo with this like navy blue with like a red collar, and I'm like, man, if that was yellow with like a white collar or like a white undershirt, that would have been such a perfect nod for like fans of the show. It would have been great. And it's just because it looks very dichromatic, and it would have been fun if we had played into like more of her like classic look. But then the decision to like introduce Toka and Razar, and like I know a lot of people wanted Bebop and Rocksteady. I would have loved Bebop and Rocksteady. I am so glad that we finally got Bebop and Rocksteady on the next Ninja Turtles 2, the one for like the Bay Turtles one, which is not a terrible movie. Like, it's actually like a lot of fun, and like Bebop and Rocksteady are some of the best parts of that. So like, but I understand like making this movie, they would want new characters for a whole host of reasons. One, Eastman and Laird didn't really like Bebop and Rocksteady. Like, they just thought that they were kind of like one-note jokes that they designed for like, one of the early toys that happened to become major characters on the cartoons. So I get that. But also, like, you're making the new property. You're going to want new merch. You're going to make new characters. I get it. Like, and Toka and Raza look really cool. Like, they're like a good set of like henchman villains, Well,
and they give us the best line ever from the Shredder when he walks out and like, babies, they are babies. I use that everywhere. That's what, that's what I see when I pick up my infant son is these babies. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah, and then later when he actually is like controlling them, where it's like, go, play, have fun.
Oh.
Masters say have fun.
Is Shredder a good father? He might be. I mean, he was reluctant at first. He was reluctant at first, but then he accepted them.
He stepped up.
Yeah. He stepped up. I'm trying not to become a Shredder apologist in this, but this feels like this is what's happening to me.
Oh, geez.
He's doing okay here. He's a bit blinded by rage throughout this whole movie. Like, Tatsu is like, should we rebuild the foot? And he's like, nope, revenge. And like that would have, like, rebuilding the foot is the way to go if he had been thinking clearly.
Honestly, yes, that is a misstep from him. But I understand. I mean, he was thrown in a garbage truck and crushed.
Yeah, and compacted.
And then compacted.
Technically died, but for the reason of movie, not. Yes.
Right.
Right.
And was not originally supposed to be in this movie. It's because this movie was rushed that they were like, well, fuck, let's bring back Shredder. Okay. But I think fans didn't really notice. Like, for one thing, the idea that Casey Jones just murders the Shredder at the end of the movie, just casually, because he literally says, oops, and then hits the switch, like, is a dark turn for that character.
I don't know. I always thought like Casey Jones murderer was good. I mean, in the third movie, he's Casey Jones samurai babysitter, so.
But yeah, like, we get Shredder coming back and trying to like, get revenge makes enough sense. And like, for us watching this back in the day, like I saw this in theaters. I saw the first one in theaters. I was a huge Ninja Turtles fan, and the idea that Shredder would just come back and keep doing what he's doing made sense, because that's what the show did. Like, and you know what? He came back and he carved his helmet to be like even sharper, kind of like buzzsaw blades. It's even Shredderier. Somehow
he's living up to his name. He went from, well, he could have called it greater, I suppose. But anyway, sorry.
But we get Toka and Raza, and in terms of design, I think they're great. I think apparently they're like kit bashes from like the Henson workshop. like taking parts from other kind of designs for things. So I think there's some Skeksis. Sorry, wow, I can't pronounce words right now. In there for Toka, and possibly some of the design work that would later go into dinosaurs. And like Raza, like clearly, like they have lots of like walk around like fur bodies. So like, you know, they mash them all together, like, you know, kind of like unify the design trends, and you got some pretty cool looking monsters right there that are big and scary and voiced by Frank Welker.
Yeah. And I love that, like, you know, they're not trained. They're not, there's nothing to that. They're just very simple monsters. And the way they showed in the movie is basically the turtles can't handle them. You know, they can't punch them. They can't kick them. You know, they don't care. They're just, you know, an obstacle to get across.
Yeah.
So, and they bring a lot of, you know, comedic stuff to it too, as well.
Yeah. I mean, I honestly think that we should have a ritual of eating donuts before any and all attacks.
I agree.
Just think like, it's like, I think that should be a ritual. That's sacred donut eating ritual.
Yes, although I was thinking about this one where, like, they're real lucky that they had to freeze the ooze into ice cubes and put it in the donut. They could have just put poison. Like, I just had like poison donuts and just killed the two.
Well, now you're getting into what you would change about them.
Yeah, and like, and also like, this is a kids movie, like, and they're not murderers. They're not Casey Jones. They're the Ninja Turtles.
Right.
Like, I think before we do move on to anything else, I think we do need to talk about Ernie Reyes Jr. as Kino.
Oh yeah.
What did you think? What did you think, Sam? You brought it up.
Oh, well, I always love him because, like, so I used to study martial arts, and he's just got such amazing clean movements. I love him in every movie. He's always just so active. He is here to just kind of be that, like, what is that, like the kids passenger, like, whoa, I met the turtles kind of thing, right? So that's kind of like the role he's playing. Like the line in the beginning with the girl with the hitting on them, and then she's mean to him, and then he's meaner. Not
that fat
great.
joke.
Not great.
Misogyny.
Did not fall well. Definitely a normal thing for the 90s and 80s. So, like, definitely like peak 80s, 90s writing there. So that was like still not great. That didn't hold up. But everything else was pretty great. I mean, like, he's a pizza delivery guy with a sense of like heroicism, runs into a space, is overwhelmed, like has a couple of great kicks in, and then there's way too many guys. Why are there so many people on that heist, by the way? There's a lot of guys on that heist. What are they splitting, and who are they working for? That is never answered. Also, they are all wearing regular clothes, so I don't know.
Flannel, lots of flannel.
Yeah,
Lots
well,
of
they've
flannel.
got the leggings, like the stockings over their heads, so you can't make out their facial features.
But then when he's like, "Who are you, kid?" He like takes it off. Like, bro, there's probably a camera. You've given yourself away.
That's true.
I don't think those criminals in the beginning were the brain trust of crime.
No. In fact, I kind of felt like they were just like the crew from the movie. They were like, we just need people to be in this scene, is what it felt like because of the outfits they were wearing.
Keep it under budget.
Yeah. Well, I love the inclusion of Kino as a character. I realize that there are some people who see him as like the Jar Jar Binks equivalent, but I think that that's unfair. And I think, like, he's such an audience surrogate, like an avatar for all of us as kids, being like, oh, I can be like that. Because he's 18 in this movie. Like, he's so young in terms of like how Hollywood casts stuff. And like, and he's able to fight these guys. He's like, did I mention I study martial arts? Like, it's not that he's gifted a power. It's not some scenario like the Blue Ranger where he is just like the little kid just allowed to tag along. Like, he's a teenager, but also they're the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So like they might be better trained at this all. They fought the foot before, but like, you know, aside from possibly some biological differences just by virtue of the fact that they are, you know, scientifically mutated turtles. Like, he's theoretically kind of in the same bracket, so it's like, it's nice to have a human friend. It makes so much sense to have a pizza boy be a friend to the turtles.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I love that detail. I love the opening montage of all of the people eating pizza, with the the famous Rays, like, parody famous Roys.
Yeah.
I only have one thing about it. There were no napkins in any of the folds. And as a native New Yorker, that was very upsetting to me because I just felt like that pizza wasn't very good. If you got good pizza, you need some napkins or something in that fold, some paper to catch the grease. That's a good pizza. Other than that, those are not going to be good slices. So I was just like, these slices do not seem that delicious to me because there is not the tuck and fold that I expect from good pizza. So I do have a
aggressively
criticism
long
of that.
cheese shots that were going on throughout all didn't sell you on it.
No, because it looked cold. Like, I'll tell you what now, it looked cold. It looked cold to me. It did, like, you can tell when pizza's cold. You can tell when it's hot. Like, I've eaten too many pizzas on the walk, and none of those pizzas looked like they were fresh. So I did like, you know what? That's my pitch. Change the whole pizza scene. Make it fresh pizza.
Well, you see, here's my headcanon, though, which is that we know that Kino is very easily distracted when he goes to deliver pizzas.
Yes.
You are not blaming Kino on this. It is not his fault. He's driving a fast car.
I'm not blaming Kino. I'm blaming the criminals that Kino feels compelled to stop.
I mean, do we
pizza's
know
cold.
that Kino was the one that delivered the pizzas we saw in the beginning? Because, you know,
No, but I'm playing devil's advocate here.
It was just people walking around. There were people leaving the pizza shop. Like, I'm just saying, like, I don't know. I'm just saying that the props department failed.
No, I think it's that Roy's pizza is a lesser pizza than Ray's. It's right next to it. People can confuse it, and it's like, no, Roy's is always cold, and it's just a knockoff.
It's for people who like the taste of, like, day old pizza, like morning after
right.
cold pizza, which is its own delicacy. I'm not judging. I'm just saying.
I'm from Wisconsin, so the fact that there's just tons of cheese on it was like, oh yeah, that's what we do here. Cheese capital of the world.
I mean, there were plenty of people that were folding it. Like, there were plenty of extras that knew that that's what you should do with a pizza. Congratulations to them. But that's not the point. I did have a problem that there were no napkins. Yeah.
Well, back to Kino.
And I get it. They were like, "Oh, we want to see the pizza," but, like, nah, it's wrong.
Well, so yeah, back to Kino.
Back to Kino.
Well,
it is nice that we have a pizza delivery boy as a friend who is, like I said, an audience surrogate member who has martial arts experience already, so it doesn't have to feel like, sure, he could be a little bit of a Mary Stew in the sense that he's able to immediately beat up people, but he's not better than the Turtles. In fact, he's distinctly worse than them when it actually comes to serious moments. He's just almost as good as them.
Right. He's training. He's young. He's and I think that, like, having him there gives you a nice segue for Raph's, rebellion, because he's always going to rebel because that's his character. And so, like, he goes off to rebel, and he's going to do what the kid thought. Yeah, we're going to get you recruited. We're going to spy. We're going to figure it out. So Kino actually brings, like, real information, right? Because he lets them know that the Foot is recruiting. They're back on the street. They're looking for martial artists. They're looking for young people just like him. And I think that he's worked very well into the plot. And
he's smart enough to know when he's in over his head. I mean, obviously in the beginning when he's like, okay, there's way too many of you. But like when he's in the Foot Clan test and he's trying to get to the bell thing and he's just looking at it, and then he lets Raphael just rush right in, grab all the bells and hand them to him.
Yeah,
that is perfect. And he's also proving that he's very smart because, like, okay, he knows I'm a pizza delivery guy. Whatever is happening at April O'Neil's house seems to involve tons and tons of pizza, like an inhuman amount of pizza.
Right.
So, he's smart enough to...
She should be buying it wholesale.
Right.
Yeah. and he puts two and two together because the Turtles pay him for that first pizza that was going to April O'Neil.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Kino's smart.
Right.
Well, and also he seems to be aware of the setting. Like, he has information that we, the audience, especially the kids in the audience, would put together based on all the details. It's like, you don't need to feed him quite as much because he seems to be just aware. It's like, oh yeah, all right, we're gonna redo the scene from the first movie where April's boss is there and like the turtles are all hiding. But in this case, he picks up on it a little bit faster because he's the smart kid. He's the one who's putting it all together because he's just kind of a little bit more in the loop.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
Because he's us.
Right. He is us. Although, and it was kind of appropriate that, at the end, he's like, God, put me in, Splinter. I can take the shredder. Help me. I can play. And he kind of helps save the day at the end, which is sort of there, but he also kind of screws it up and then enables Super Shredder to super shred. But I might be getting ahead on that. Anyway.
Well, I mean, it's the question is, what does Kino bring in the third act? And I would argue that he's not really that helpful at the end of the movie. I think he's better for setting up the plot and looping them in that the Foot is recruiting and all those details. Like, he's really important to Act 2. Like, the confrontation with Toka and Raza with the trap with Raphael, that's all because Kino is there in the first place.
Right.
But once we get into it's like, all right, Toka and Raza are going to go on rampage. We have to go fight. He's held back by Splinter. And then when he leaves, what he actually accomplishes is he runs into the middle of a Vanilla Ice concert, pushes his way through the crowd, kicks a guy, and then that's it.
Right.
I mean, what he accomplishes is one of the greatest dances in Ninja Turtle history, which is because he clears the way for the ninja rap dance. And that is cinematic history gold.
No, but at that point, it had already been going on.
That's at the end when Shredder's standing up on the speaker going, oh, Turtles, I'll just mutate her, this other lady,
Right.
I mean, that's what I would do. I'd be like, well, it's not working for me. Let's mutate everyone.
Oh, so what did you
Villainy.
think? What did you think of New April? 'Cause I have some thoughts on that.
Yeah. Okay. So as a kid, it's such a weird. As a kid, I liked her more. And I think generally speaking, she's fine. Looking back and really like having much warmer feelings for the first one now, I think that Judith Hogg, who was April O'Neil in the first movie, I overall prefer. She feels like more of a real character, whereas this feels like someone playing the part of April O'Neil. In this case, Judith. Sorry, just got the names screwed up.
Paige Turco.
In this case, Paige Turco. Yeah. I think she sells it as being like a news anchor. Like I think she comes across as being like, yeah, that is the type of woman who would be a reporter. And like, I'm impressed that she bought a place in Soho so fast after her place in the Village burned down.
True.
And it's a pretty dope space, and it's cool that she lets them stay with her. Like I think that pickup there from the first movie is really nice, but it is then weird that she's just like, oh, it's April O'Neil. I don't know. Every time they recast, like sometimes you get scenarios like Iron Man 2, where Don Cheadle walks in and you see the back of his head and it's just like, it's here. I'm like, let's just deal with it. This one, I think it's the suit actor for Michelangelo is the guy at the like at the buzzer when she's coming in being like, hey, you're April O'Neil.
Yeah. I mean,
and they kind of do that, but it's like they just like roll right into it really quickly.
Yeah, I don't really have a problem with her. Like I think she's fine. Like she's fine. I think that I think her role, like in terms of her character in this movie, is not quite what it was in the last movie. And so I think it's kind of like almost unfair to judge the actress's performance in comparison, because in this, she's a character who's just, this is her reality now, right? Like she comes home, she's got 4 very messy children and their father who meditates all day, and they order pizza all the time under her name. This is her new dinner forever, and she's just constantly cleaning up after them. Like I think one of the nice moments is when she walks in and she's like picking up the different things around the table, and she's mentioning which of the turtles used which things. She's just like, oh, and the exercise band for the arms is like Raphael's and things like that. And it's kind of cute because she's like tidying up the place. But I think in the first movie, because April is like discovering them, getting the scoop, figuring out all this stuff, she's just got so much more to do. In this movie,
she has an arc in the first movie.
Right. There's nothing for her to do in this film.
Yes.
She uncovers a secret by interviewing, and she tries to follow up on that. But like most of the follow up is done by the turtles themselves. Most of the explanation's done by Shredder. Like April doesn't really have, like, she's there. That's about it.
Yeah, my biggest problem with her isn't the acting; it's the writing. it's that I felt like as a character in the first movie, Case, both of you are right. You said, she has an arc. That's cool. But also I feel like, April in the first movie is not a pushover. Like, she is a fighter. She is, part of the turtle team, I feel like. And she's also, sticking it to the police, in the first movie. The police chief guy is the same actor between both movies. And in the first movie, she is like busting his chops, left and right. And in the second movie, it's basically him just being kind of a smug ass and just, that's what doing nothing. That's what we do best, or whatever that he says. Let somebody else handle it. That's what we do best is like his line there. He basically just trolls her and goes away. And I feel like it's not that is the biggest characterization difference, is that like April being given the opportunity to be like tough and there present.
Yeah, in the first movie, like the reason everything happens is because she is doing too good a job investigating the Foot Clan, and so they try to kill her. And also the cops don't want to deal with the whole situation, so there's all this tension going on with her. Whereas in this movie, she's mostly a bystander to observe things, and it's exacerbated by virtue of it being a different actress. So like it just feels like a character who's been slotted in, and like across the board, this movie, like there's so many recasting choices or just reset choices that you do lose some continuity from the first one, which would have been nice. Like Chief Stern showing up again is great, but he only shows up for one scene, and it's so much later in the movie that like by this point, like we've seen that like the news station she works at is different, her boss is different, and that was kind of a bummer there. I'm like they're we never even hear about Danny, the kid from the first movie, like. And that's only like a week before this movie takes place.
Casey Jones and her are in a relationship. We never see him, but I know there's like Casey Jones is a little, we'll take him out. He's too violent for this movie,
Studios had a lot of issues with the first movie. And so it like, I don't want to put anything on Paige Turco in this movie. She's 25 when this movie comes out. Like I'm not expecting her to have like control over how the studio depicts a character that she's being slotted into, particularly because she's coming in because Judith Hoag was fired because she spoke up about people being injured on set and unsafe working conditions for everyone. And the producer's like, well, she's too mouthy and we have to get rid of her. Like, that's a big bummer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I have to say, I mean, I know you already did this episode, or didn't you already do Turtles 3?
We did Turtles 3 a long time ago.
But I have to say, I thought Paige Turco in Turtles 3 gave a fine performance with a lot better stuff to do, being a part of the team, even though Turtles 3 is Turtles 3, than, what she could have to work with here.
Yeah, she had a real story. In this case, aside from her providing a place for them to live and having like a couple spots where she just happens to be the person covering the story, like she doesn't necessarily ever even really come off as someone who's investigating TGRI. She's just the reporter they send to be on site to interview them during a press conference, basically, because like they invited the press to the whole like decontamination thing. So it's not her story. She's just like reading off the press release.
Yeah, she does have like a scene in there where she wants to fight to stay on the story, and like she feels like something's there. But other than that, you don't really get anything, and like there's no follow-up to that scene. There's no, like, she doesn't go with the turtles to get news. She doesn't go to speak to someone new. She doesn't, it's just not in the movie. I mean, maybe that was time constraints. Maybe they decided, no, we need to make this short and sweet because this is a family-friendly film, and that would get too bogged down. But yeah, she has like one moment with her boss where she's like, I'm sticking with it. And that's about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's much more surface. It's more like an episode of the cartoon, which for me at the time, I was totally fine with because I like the cartoon a lot. But I think it is why this movie doesn't hold up as much as the first one. Like the first one is a surprisingly complex story in terms of like what is going on with all these characters and like their motivations and how the turtles like are brought into it all. Whereas this movie is mostly just Shredder is out for revenge, and so he's going for collateral damage by way of like having April followed. and by like trying to get access to this thing that might be a weapon that he can use against them. But like it's very much like the Turtles versus Shredder, and there isn't a whole lot else in terms of people's stories. Like Stern would have been great to have appear more times in this movie than just the one time that there's a damage report. It like would have been really nice to like feel like this is a continuation of the story from the first movie. But aside from like good continuity in terms of them living with April at the start, and then again, like the appearance of Stern later, there isn't a whole lot that really ties this to the first movie. Like, I mean, again, yeah, sure, Shredder like got hurt by them and is like mad, but once you get over the fact that he has a few additional scars on his face when his face was already fucked up horribly by them, like, you know, not a lot going on there. Like, again, this movie just like it's kind of like a placeholder movie. Like it's you know, it's an episode of the show that happens to be on screen, and at least it came quickly. Like compare this to Ghostbusters 2, where it was like years and years and years, and then it just happens to be like an okay movie as opposed to a great movie. And if it had come out 2 years after Ghostbusters 1, I think people would have been much more okay with it. This one came out again less than a year after the first one. A lot of us were really excited for it.
Yeah.
I mean, listen, I think as a kid, the only thing that I was upset was not seeing like Bebop and Rocksteady, like, and maybe that like Casey wasn't in it. Like, I think like as a kid, other than that, it hit all the notes for me. Like, I was like, ah.
I'm very, very sure that I used the VHS, wore out the VHS to the same level of as the first one with this second movie.
Yeah, I probably even like this one more as a kid because, again, Toka and Raza are exactly what I was here for. Like, oh, giant mutants fighting mutants? Awesome. This is great. Like, and they're fun and weird designs.
You here for giant mutants? What? Right. No. Oh, my God. Shocking.
Before we move too far on, I do want to talk about probably my favorite thing in this movie, the thing that I was so obsessed with as a kid, which is their new lair. They have such a dope, like, so they find this abandoned subway station that is like real ones in New York.
I thought it was really cool as a kid. I still thought it was cool this time when I was watching it.
Yeah, so it's based on the City Hall station for the New York subway line, which is a station that is real, and the problem is it's just too short for any modern subway trains to stop at, and so as a result the trains just go through it, but people can like see it, so it's like an Easter egg for people who are familiar with that specific chunk of the New York subway system, and like it works so well as like a lair for them. It looks really cool. It makes sense. Like they had to move from their first one, so they find this one that's, you know, it's a nice upgrade in terms of it being more of a set as opposed to like a bunch of dark, tight tunnels that they happen to be shooting in for the first one. You know, it looks like a place that like kids would really want to go hang out at. It looks more like the cartoon show having like a big place for them. In fact, it looks better than the lair in the cartoon show, which was usually just kind of like generic sewer backgrounds, but dry. Like here, it's like, okay, cool. We've got a subway car just sitting on a track. We've got, you know, like all this like stained glass and like this big space. Like all of that's very cool. You can have a Donatello walking around holding the payphone as if it was just like a landline, which I thought was like a great detail. You know, very cool. And I'm so glad it comes back for the next movie. I wish that set had become just like a big part of the Ninja Turtles franchise.
I swear they used that set in that very, very short-lived Hiam Saban produced Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles live action
The Next
TV.
Mutation.
Yeah.
Yeah. I finally picked that one up, but like I watched it as a kid, but didn't love it because you know, but
it was things.
I do need to rewatch it at some point just to see it with fresh eyes.
Can we make a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles TV show with a Power Rangers TV show American budget, but without any Japanese footage? Right.
And can we have a girl turtle with boobs and magic powers?
Oh, yeah.
Yep,
sure, why not?
Yeah. And then they'll cross over with the Power Rangers in space.
Oh, gosh, I forgot about that.
Yeah. So, yeah, and that's all coming off of this. Like, yeah, such a cool lair. I'm if it's reused in that show, great, because it was such a great set for them. Like, there's a weird scene at the start of Turtles 3 where they're like doing a dance number in it as the opening credits, and it's like, all right, well, I'm at least getting this cool set. Like, that's pretty cool. And this movie has some cool sets. Like the junkyard also looks pretty good. And the lab that they're in, despite the fact that it's like overly like, oh, we're in a science place, so there's just weird like LED lights everywhere. Like it looks, it's very visually interesting.
I feel like that was designed. There's got to be people on the cruise that play video games. I'm thinking, there's that silicon brain in like the middle. I'm thinking that somebody here plays a lot of like Konami games, or Metroid or something like that, but with all the lights and everything like that going around. I'm like, yeah, this is designed by a gamer.
Yeah. Well, and this movie just in general felt very much akin to the Konami Turtles games. Like the plot is like super bare bones. It has them just like, oh yeah, okay, we move on to this next set piece where we fight the Foot, and like some of the Foot like hop in once the first wave are defeated, and so like it keeps on playing out like in this video game kind of fashion, which it is fine. Like it would have been nice to be deeper and to be a little more interesting, but the actual beats are like, yeah, no, this feels like a turtle plot that I'm very familiar with. I spent so many quarters on the original Turtles arcade machine, and this would work easily as like levels in that.
Insert coin to get Raphael back in the junkyard.
Yeah.
Like in addition, obviously, then we get the big set piece at the end of the Vanilla Ice number, which we've referenced, but it's fucking wild, right?
Yes. I just love that the people are just like, hell yeah, there's turtles here. Oh, we're dancing. This is quite the show I've been to,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, Vanilla Ice is like a huge star at this point when this movie comes out. And it's just like, yeah, they break in, like they're having a fight one wall over from where Vanilla Ice is having a concert. Some, wherever it is.
Some construction site. Yeah.
Yeah. and they get thrown through the wall, and all of a sudden they're in this nightclub where he's doing a big show, and it turns into a big musical number. And again, it looks like the Out of Their Shell tour that they would then go on, like right down to when Shredder like shows up. That's the same kind of like theatricality that would go on with that, or it would be like a wrestling match. Like it's a big stage show with choreography,
Right.
But again, they had Vanilla Ice. Like, they had actual Vanilla Ice. It wasn't just like, oh, there's a band playing next door or something. It's actual Vanilla Ice, which is like such a huge like get, but at the same time it makes this forever the movie that Vanilla Ice was in.
Yes.
Yes.
I love how he's dancing to the same music before that he just writes the ninja rap on, at the same time that the ninjas are fighting,
Right, and just go with it.
Yeah.
Like, just like,
what was it before? What was he dancing to? What was he rapping about? I don't know. Let's forget it. Ninja rap.
Yeah. And then that song was a bop. That was everywhere when it came.
Yeah.
Like, I had the cassette that I would play all the time. Like all my friends did too. Like, the ninja rap was just really popular.
Well, me watching this time, I'm like, after a couple of days after I watched the movie again, I was like, man, I really want to hit the ninja rap. So, you search it on your, whatever your music service is. But then I discovered that Vanilla Ice did a ninja rap too. Don't listen to that one. It's not. It's when he was trying to do his gangster rap thing that he was trying to reinvent himself.
No, that sounds awful.
No, don't listen to that one. I mean, unless you want to laugh in a sad way.
Unless you want to cry while laughing.
Right. But yes, I thought it was a bop. It definitely was. And it was also when in the middle of the whole Vanilla Ice versus Hammer, which probably wasn't actually a thing, but people made it a thing.
Yeah, that weird marketing pushes combined with weird racism that always is looking for like a white actor or a white performer to fill a niche.
Well, there was a Hammer song prominently featured in the first movie, and then there's a Vanilla Ice song prominently in the second one.
Yeah. He does the turtle rap at the end, right? The TURTLE power.
No, that's a band called Partners in Crime, which might just be some studio musicians, but they use it in all the turtle movies. No, the MC Hammer track for the first one is called "This Is What We Do," and you cannot find it on any music service that I've looked at.
I mean,
very cool.
I remember the soundtrack for the first movie being like everywhere and like very big. Like there are songs that like when they come out, I'm like, oh yeah, that was a Ninja Turtles. So I think they were just kind of following like
who's popular.
Yeah, who's popular, what's going on? Because there was especially a lot of music, for like when they did a lot of the, when basically the whatchamacallit, when the Foot was taking all the poor kids and kind of bringing them in. So there was like a lot of music that was played during that. And so like I remember there were a lot of songs that I like was everywhere on the radio. So they just have a history of that stuff. It was natural for them to choose the next person who was super popular.
Yeah. I mean, Turtles, like, I don't think we can convey to someone who wasn't alive at the time how ubiquitous the franchise was in everything. Like, there was a cereal, there were, like, obviously there's toys, but there was sports toys. Like, I had a Ninja Turtles like hockey set, like one of those like foosball style, but it's like a hockey one where they have like different tracks that they move on kind of thing. Obviously we had the video games, we had a fucking traveling musical show that they would then go on to do. Like it like Ninja Turtles was everywhere. They had fucking chips, like everything. Like, you know, we're talking about like full on like the apex of the marketing wave. Like the whole 80s, like we're going to merchandise everything, you know, like everything's getting a cartoon and toys and all this tie-in stuff. Like Ninja Turtles was like the height of that. Like,
yeah,
which is crazy to think about. Like just how many like random ass things you can find out there. Like again, Lucky Charms knockoff Ninja Turtle cereal. Also, pizza flavored chips that would be marketed with Ninja Turtle stuff. Like
yeah,
they wanted to get into everything, and so yeah, sure, marketing tie-ins with like giant pop stars makes sense.
Yeah, Ninja Turtles.
But it's still so weird to look back on.
I mean, gosh, it went so deep in the 90s that there was like Ninja Turtle. I remember Hostess pies. You know, being Ninja Turtle Hostess pies filled with green ooze, which was it was vanilla.
I do remember those.
Yeah, it was vanilla custard just with green food coloring, but you know they did it. So
vanilla icing.
Oh, by the way, speaking of going back to, remember how I said Partners in Crime might just be some studio musicians? It wasn't. It was actually a DJ group from New York that is most well known for doing Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles related stuff, but they actually did one song on the Vanilla Ice movie soundtrack, Cool as Ice.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, DJ Keymaster Snow and MC Golden Voice, and apparently KRYME stands for Keep Your Rhythm Motivating Elements. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was like the spin that wheel, I think was the name of the song that was all over New York radio.
That was
from the first movie too.
That was Yeah Kid K, which is the singer from some other hip hop band.
Yeah.
Did you?
Yeah, but like looking at like Turtles 1, that soundtrack is more like Rocky 5. Like there's a lot of like hip hop that is like it feels more urban, and part of that is it's a lower budget movie, so they can only get like what songs they could get. Even though by the time we're getting the soundtrack put together, it was clear this was going to be a huge hit because the Turtles franchise had become so big. This movie is like shifting into that early 90s, moving away from like the 80s style hip hop kind of stuff. And hence why your big hip hop track is by Vanilla Ice.
There was a lot of like early 90s tree hugging stuff on this too. Like I remember just like a lot of the albums being like, you know, about pollution and things like that. But I mean, that was part of the theme of the movie too, is, you know, TGRI dumping ooze, you know, industrial waste out here, you know, could clean it up, but they really hit it home on the album. I have all of these tapes. I know exactly where they are, about 20 feet in a box away from me. And yeah, it's interesting to watch the soundtracks as they change between the movies. But yeah, the second one, definitely some interesting choices.
Last thing before we get to pitches, we should talk about Professor Perry, the David Warner's character in this whole movie, who is the lead person for TGRI. So one thing I was when I was rewatching it, we get to the end of the movie and he's like at the concert and doing like a dance while the Go Ninja Go. He's like doing his arms back and forth, and that's actually one of the few spots where there's like really distinct lighting on anyone's face that caused him to like kind of glow blue. And I was like, that's right, he's in Tron. Like,
Oh.
He's the main bad guy in Tron. Oh, right. I forgot about that. Which was just kind of a fun moment there. But I think he does a really good job of being this character who was originally supposed to be Baxter Stockman, like the the fly guy from the cartoons, and actually the second villain from the comics. Like he created the Mouser robots in issue 2, and was a standalone villain for that issue. And so he was intended to be that character. And then when that was ruled out because they didn't think they could get the puppetry together for the Mousers, which in retrospect, I'm like, that wouldn't have been that hard. I get that it would be a big project, so the movie that you're getting off the ground 11 months after the first one probably wasn't going to be the movie that you do it. But those Mousers, like if you remember, were like very simple kind of like mechanical heads.
Yeah. Just had two little legs.
Yeah, it wasn't a lot of articulation. So I think that actually would have been really cool if like Henson Studios was doing those puppets. But they didn't. So they then were like, well, what if he was something else? And so there was a thought that this character was going to be the body that was controlled by the Utrom Krang.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
And that this was just a human suit that the alien was wearing. And so that was supposed to be the secret of the Ooze, that the Ooze itself had extraterrestrial nature or like origins to it, which also the cartoon had that too, because it was technology from Dimension X. So they could have had that element in there and had more of a secret, but they decided to pull back on that detail.
Yeah, they didn't do the whole Utrom thing for quite a few years in the United States. And I think it was the 2002, 2006. I don't remember when that series was. But
the 2000s animated series. Yeah.
So.
That's where they that were a big plot point, and then like Shredder was actually that one, and all that, But yeah, like they, but Krang was really popular amongst people, and we were all familiar with Krang. I don't know. I like him. David Warner in general is a charming actor. I like a lot of the moments with him all. It is a spot where like the secret of the Ooze is kind of just the title, because there isn't a lot to it. Like even him saying like it was an unknown chemical that got like exposed to radiation would have been more interesting if he actually knew what was going on.
The secret of the Ooze was the friends they made along the way.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, that would be great if they had Sway, Toka, and Raza.
There you go.
Yeah, I mean, that I guess the thing is, this is a very fun movie with not a lot of substance,
right,
or secrets.
It's an excuse to put popcorn in your mouth.
Yeah,
for children.
Ideally, like a cheese-flavored popcorn, like one that has like kind of a pizza kind of flavor to it.
Yeah, or just have pizza. Just have pizza.
Or pizza.
Just get pizza.
Because like it's still a fun movie, and like there's nothing that I object to in this movie. I just wish there was a little bit more, because the first movie had like a bit more going on. But why don't we speculate on what we would have done, because it's a pretty short movie that had some room, because like it's coming off of a ridiculously successful predecessor. So I'm curious what you all think about that. So why don't we take a break, and when we come back, we will speculate on what this movie could have been.
Hey there, Screen Beans. Have you heard about Screen Snark?
Rachel, this is an ad break. They aren't Screen Beans until they listen to the show.
Fine. Potential Screen Beans. You like movies and TV shows, right?
I mean, who doesn't? Screen Snark is a casual conversation about the movies and television shows that are shaping us as we live our everyday lives.
That's right, Matt. We have a chat with at least one incredible guest every episode, hailing from all walks. We've interviewed chefs,
writers, costumers, musicians,
yoga teachers, comedians, burlesque dancers,
folks in the film and TV industry,
and more.
We'd be delighted for you to join us every other Monday on the Certain POV Podcast Network.
Or wherever you get your podcasts, fresh and tasty off the presses.
What? That's not...
Can I call them Screen Beans now?
Fine.
Screen Beans!
So tune in and we'll see you at the movies or on a couch somewhere.
'Cause you're all Screen Beans now.
You will be mine.
And we're back.
And
all
we're
right.
back.
And we're back.
Are we back?
Tune
We're
in
back.
for the next Turtle Time. All right, so Mike, we have one rule in terms of the order for us giving pitches, and it can all be collaborative with us like chiming in. I'm just not allowed to lead before Sam. So as our guest, you may select to go first, or you may select Sam to go first. And in which case, I could potentially go after Sam, and then you could go last if you wanted. But I'm just not allowed to go before Sam. Is the one rule.
Well, I've been thinking about it a lot since I watched the movie again, and I gotta say, I feel like I'm not entirely sure what I want to pitch, so I'm going to let Sam go first.
Darn, I've lost this one because I'm not sure either.
Oh,
no, that's fine. I will say this. I feel like this movie is one of those movies where I feel like the filmmakers set out to create a family-friendly film that was fun, that was very much like the cartoon, that people were familiar with, that they could draw even more audience into and create even more toys. And I think that they did their job. And in that way, I feel like, does it need another pass? Not really. However, I will say that from from someone who's going to try to be objective and not just a huge fangirl about all of this, there are certain things that I wish were kind of more explained. And I think that the Ooze needed a secret. I think that there's this line where Donatello, maybe it was Leonardo, but one of them says that, all these years not knowing what we are, and now it's this, and we're not special. And there's this really
Donatello.
it's this really deep emotional thing to say, right? Because when you think about it, the turtles have been living with this secret of this question of why are we like this? Why do we look like this? No other turtles look like this. We walk, we talk, we eat pizza, we live in sewers. What is up with this? And then all of a sudden there's this almost answer, right? And the movie says it, which is great, but then they just kind of never really revisit it. It's the precipice for why the turtles have to go to the lab to find out about the Ooze, but they kind of get derailed by meeting the Foot, and we never actually get to why this is, or even something that makes the turtles feel better about their origin, right? This is a really sad thing that Donatello has just said. And as a kid, that flew right over my head. I was like, oh, they're going to find out their secret, right? But I was so distracted by the fights that I didn't care that we didn't get back to it. But as an adult, I'm kind of still sad because I want something that's reaffirming for the turtles and their existence. I need something in this that lets them know that maybe their origins don't need to be special, but that's okay because they're already special. I need something that's a little more warm and tingling to kind of wrap that up, because I feel like there are little throwaway things here and there, just with April fighting her boss. You feel like there's supposed to be more there. You feel like there's supposed to be her getting into trouble. And you could say, even though I love Kino, you could say that we don't need Kino, that we could have April kind of go to investigate the Foot. We could say that she could be the reason Raph goes off because Raphael's always adored her. But I do love Kino, so I'm not going to do that. But I do think that she needs to kind of be an alarmist. I think she needs to go to the police or the authorities because she believes that there's something wrong with the Ooze. I think that she should be reporting on that. I think she should be pushing all the doors. I think she should be reporting on things. So I need a couple of things. I need more development for April, and I need, whether it's Kang or just I need something to be the real secret of the Ooze. I need an explanation from the scientist what happened, because it's not there. And I don't know how we get there. I mean, do we let them follow listen, Kid Sam thinks Kang is the answer, right? Let's make this alien shit. Kay said that. I was yes. But I don't need that to be. And I know that puppetry and making the puppet, this is so soon. I don't know if timeline that can be done, but I need to know the secret of the Ooze. And that is, I've given no answers. I've only given questions, but guys, that is how I fix this movie. What is the secret of the Ooze? Even if there's even if it's just someone doing Kang's voiceover.
Krang. It's Krang.
Krang. Yeah.
Krang. Do I see Kang? It's saying Kang?
Yeah,
I keep
no, they
thinking
see
Kang the
bleeding into your
Conqueror.
brain.
Yeah.
Oh my God, guys. Krang. I'm bad with names as it is. I'm human. So
It's all good.
I hit 35 and names just flew out my brain. So Krang, if there's like a voiceover that we're familiar with, like maybe we could have gotten the cartoon actor or like, I don't know. Like, I feel like there should have been something, even if it was just a tag at the end about aliens. I need to know the secret of the Ooze. That would fix this movie.
Yeah, if I can piggyback off of you, because I also don't have like really hard notes about this one. It's not like a big restructure, because I think the beats work fine. I think that where everyone moves from point A to B, all work a-okay. Like, go to TGRI, etc. So yes, I would say have the alien tie-in. I realized that it was cut. I think you could make it work. Like, it's the Henson shop. Like, they could pull a Quato-esque kind of like stomach alien thing pretty easily. And like we only needed it as a teaser at the very end of the movie with David Warner. Here's because this shot won't save the movie, but this is my pitch for a shot at the end of the movie, which is that David Warner walks into the lab from the beginning, or from earlier in the movie, like where he was disposing all of it, takes the ooze, puts it in the thing to dispose of it, so that we actually see him destroy it. And then you can say, finally, it's done. And like one of the other lab guys can walk in. And it's like, is everything okay? It is now. And then they can he can open his shirt. It's like, or his stomach open, and it could be something to the effect of, like, the turtles trust us. Yeah. Like something to that effect.
Yeah.
Where it's like, they'll stay out of our way. Or they won't investigate any further. They think we're just a harmless human company, because it says that the TGR disappears completely. Their offices all are emptied out. Everyone just completely books it, which is suspect as fuck, considering that a week earlier they were digging up radioactive material that they were acknowledging to the press. But yeah, reveal that the aliens have left Earth or something like that, really lean into it right there. But you don't need a lot. You could honestly get away with one close up on this puppet setup, which honestly, with his shirt obscuring everything up until Krang's head, you could have maybe the indication of some metal for the framing of the cavity that Krang is sitting in there, and then just the puppet. And it just needs to be some sort of squid looking puppet that like I said, Henson Studios could put that together in an afternoon. It would not be that big of an effort on that front. And you could keep David Warner's voice, or maybe make it sound a little modulated or something. Or you got Frank Welker. He could easily cover that right there as well. Would have been great. So I think that would be a nice detail there to be what's going on? What is the secret of the Ooze? Oh, it's extraterrestrial in origin. I think that works really well. Earlier, when he says an unknown combination of chemicals, he could say a unique combination of chemicals, indicating that he actually does know it, but he's just not going to share that information just every time he's talking about it all. I think that would be just a nice vibe there. He's not in cahoots with Shredder. He got captured by Shredder. He's like Krang isn't a comic character. That was a character created for the cartoon,
right,
using the Utrom designs. So that, and they're benevolent in the original comics. So you can kind of play it where this character might be antagonistic. You don't even have to call him Krang. You could just have it be an Utrom, and then the kids who like the cartoon will be like, it's Krang, and then the people who like the comics can be like, it's an Utrom, and then just move on with your life. So I think that would be really nice there. I think that we need arcs. I think Donatello is the easiest one to insert an arc for. And oh my God, we did not talk about how it used to be Corey Feldman and that was recast for this movie.
Oh, yeah.
Donatello and Raphael. Raphael's less obvious. I think the voice actor does a pretty good job of sounding like the Raph from the first movie. But yeah, Corey Feldman was the big star of the first one. It's an Corey Feldman role. And because he was in a lot of stuff at this point in terms of controversies, they didn't bring him back over for this one. There might be some money involved too. Who can really say? Is it bad publicity? Is it he needed more money? Maybe it's both. But he wasn't for this one. He does come back for number 3. I think the Donatello is a good Donatello. One of my few objections with the original Ninja Turtles movie is that Corey Feldman didn't feel like the right voice for Donatello. That character from the cartoon, who is this big nerd, doesn't feel like the Donatello we got in the first movie. And he does feel like that here.
Yeah.
And I would have liked if there was more going on with him being curious about the Ooze. I think he should be the one that is insisting that they watch the report, and is really interested in it all. I think I would love to have a scenario where when we're in April's apartment at first, we see that they have boxes of their shit from their lair that they have brought up. And I would love for him to have like a map with like strings attached to it all, like that kind, you know, a style thing.
Yeah.
Trying to indicate like he's been researching the ooze. I feel like he should already be interested in this because the ooze is a thing that they know about already. We like the whole 15 years ago, I found 4 baby turtles in a weird radioactive substance.
Right.
Like that's the story they tell every time. There's no surprise that they were hit by some sort of thing. You know, it would be surprising if they did with the original comic thing where it was the fucking radioactive stuff that got Daredevil blinded. And had, it was just like fully lean in. Like, this is the start of the Marvel movies, guys.
Just some other guy running around being blind.
Which is why I was talking about Kang. It all ties in.
Yeah.
Actually, I do want Kang to be in this movie or Mephisto. That's how I fix this movie.
Yeah, Mephisto shows up and it's but I think like that's an easy arc to put on the character who was more of a background character in the first movie. Like the first movie, all 4 of the turtles have stories, with Michelangelo probably having the least of a story to him. But certainly the emphasis is on the relationship between Raphael and Leonardo in the first movie. And I think this movie, they could have put more of a focus on Donatello, maybe Michelangelo, but like he is the comic relief, so it's not necessary either. Like all 4 of them should have something going on. So I'm not saying Raph shouldn't go off again because that's perfectly in character for him. Although maybe it would be interesting if it was Leo this time, and he's the one who thinks like Kino has a really good plan, and that this could be a spot where he thinks it's a good way to go.
Right, because it's strategic, and Leonardo is known to be strategic. Go on.
Right, yeah, like Raph is the hothead for it, but Leo having a good plan would, like, I could see him actually kind of rolling with that. Could be fun, just so it's not beat for beat the same movie.
Yeah.
As the previous one.
Also, it would have made like. One of my criticisms is that wouldn't you be alarmed if Raph went missing the same way he went missing before? So it would have been like, oh, well, it's Leo. He's pretty level-headed. He's probably okay. We haven't been able to get in contact with him. And then you could have had a funny line where Raphael was mad because he had to hold too many boxes because Michelangelo's not helping him because he's eating pizza.
Yeah. Yeah, like that all fits there. I would have liked when they're in the junkyard fight, if Splinter was actively firing more arrows than just his initial one.
Yeah.
Like if he was acting as like a sniper. And I realize that this is not the movie where he's going to be like mowing down foot soldiers, but like he could be hitting things, like knocking down piles of tires, or like,
Yeah.
you know,
or
like,
just providing a distraction and giving them
here's
cover.
a wreck of a car. He hits the steering wheel. All of a sudden, like the airbag like pops open or something, and like knocks open the door and knocks someone. Or, you know, you could do like slapsticky kind of like violence.
You could
here,
even
where
pay
it's
homage to the first movie where he shoots at the shredder and then the shredder catches the arrow. You know.
Yeah. Yeah, that would sort of set up like some cool stuff with Shredder. Side note on Shredder, the decision to have his face mask be like a grill is probably a bad choice, because he's supposed to have a really fucked up face that they have in shadow, and then once he's like got his mask on, you can pretty clearly see his face.
Yeah.
And that's a bad choice for three reasons. Reason one is that you can see that his face is really not that fucked up because they didn't go that hard on the makeup for it. Two, the character is dubbed, so it would have been a wise choice just not to see his lips, period, because like why bother?
Yeah.
And three, when we get to Super Shredder and like whatever is going on with that outfit, he does have like a solid like outfit, or like a solid metal like cover on his face.
Go Kevin Nash.
Yeah. Yeah. On that note, if Super Shredder had more of an animalistic design as opposed to his costume points got bigger, like if it looked like spikes were coming out of his body, which is, I think, the implication, that would have been fun. I don't know what the budget on that design though was, and like
Right.
it's cool that like Super Shredder is so cool as an idea. Like I was so into this concept right there. I was so excited because it's like, it's a final boss. It's a fucking video game final boss. It's perfect.
And then we just jump into a lake. Sorry.
Yeah.
Or the
that
river.
shouldn't have been in like the harbor, or like the whatever like the dock that they're on. Like that doesn't quite make sense. Like why is he smashing all this stuff and then they can just jump out into the water? Like I feel like it should have been inside a structure of some kind that he's like tearing around. Like the construction site they were just at would have been perfect. And they could just, you know, retract into their shells and hide under stuff, and that would have been, you know, kind of a different thing. Or there could have been a body of water that they leap into, but I don't know. He's he kills himself real fast.
Yeah.
And it seems, and they have a very easy way to escape. So it seems like him destroying everything doesn't really make sense in terms of just the speed of how it would happen. Like,
to me, it feels like
they'll escape more easily than he'll kill them.
We escalated the villainy, or the boss here, and then like, crap, how do we end this? Oh, we just established that they can't fight Toka and Raza. Now the Shredder's superpowered. Ooh, how do we do this?
Yeah, I mean, I get it. Like, him destroying himself, that makes sense. It happens really fast.
The lesson is that revenge always destroys yourself in the process.
Right.
Sorry.
Yeah, no. but that is the thing, though. I fully agree with that point that they're making. I just think that the scene itself plays out so quickly that it's not capitalized on. It's like it could have been a more interesting sequence there. But yeah, like that's my basic thoughts there. Like, I feel like Donatello having a little bit more of a story to him, like being obsessed with learning about the ooze, would have really helped. I mean, I feel like the division on the violence is a thing that, like, it was hard. They're trying to work with it all. They're trying to like really like pull back this reputation that Ninja Turtles was too violent. I would have liked a little bit more. I think it could have been justified a bit if they just didn't have their weapons a whole bunch of times. Like, if April didn't let them carry their weapons around that, like, the apartment, that would have been like a detail for it. Because then later, like, they're all doing like makeshift stuff. Like, Leonardo has like 2 sticks instead of his swords, but his swords are clearly on his back when they're in the junkyard fight. Like, the actual choreography for the fights are all fine, but some of the shots are too long on them, so you can really see that they're like, oh, okay, now we do this stunt here kind of moments. Like, it would have benefited from slightly more rapid cutting, and it would have benefited from them not obviously having better alternatives on their person for how they're fighting at any given moment. But, like, sure, is that opening fight in the mini mall, like, kind of silly? Yeah. Is it kind of fun to see, like, Michelangelo beat up people with, like, a yo-yo? Also, yeah. I was here for it then. I'm still here for it now. But I understand why, like, new people going to watch it with, like, who have never seen the Ninja Turtles movies might not dig this one as much as I think they would dig the first one.
Yeah. I think if you're a kid, you're probably fine. I think if you're an adult, you might dig the first one more.
Yeah. So if you're ready for me to go.
Yeah.
Okay. I think for me, this kind of gets to, exactly what your podcast is called. It just needed like one more pass. And maybe they didn't have that because of time or whatever. Being 11 months, you're basically like, we're writing as we're shooting here almost. But I feel like just adding some explanations here and there about why things are different. Hey, April just like fell head over heels in love with Casey Jones. Why is he not here? Well, I don't know. His grandpa is sick and he's going to take care of him, or whatever.
Yeah, one throwaway line would have been nice.
Yeah. Or they're not going to use their weapons as much in this movie. I remember to big effect in the very first movie, like, hey, Raphael lost a sai. And that was the huge plot point in the first movie, So I think just adding these other things, like maybe the Turtles lose their stuff. It's not exactly easy to go and find, a high quality samurai sword for Leonardo to have. So, maybe some of these other things that Turtles are sort of depowered a little bit and they have to deal with this stuff. I think that would take care of a lot of that whole thing and also satisfy the people who are like, yeah, they're a little too violent. But yeah, I didn't have a lot of notes outside of that, other than I think the biggest thing for me that I would change would be there's 2 themes I got out of this movie. The one was what you talked about before, Sam, is or maybe it was Case. Either way, it was the whole thing about Donatello wanting to know, where they came from. That was one.
Right, yeah.
The other one was that Splinter was talking about, like, you're never going to belong in this world. That's not your place. And I think a lot of this movie would be better if they kind of explored that, like the Turtles, like finding their own place in the world and feeling good about it. Like, that's another one that was just like fell away. Like,
yeah,
they're never going to be able to just go to a movie theater and just, be turtles and be teenagers and live with humans and be normal. They always will have to have this sort of secrecy, or else, everything bad will happen. And, making the best out of the family that they found, April and Casey and everything like that. None of that stuff was explored, but it was all like mentioned. So I think adding like a subplot of that would actually make very much the movie a lot better. And it would add that arc for them,
Yeah. It would just make it richer, because like, I think like the newspaper is like this attempt at like, oh, they kind of have acceptance because like ninjas are born, at this thing, but it's not really, because it's like dubbed as a publicity stunt. And basically Splinter then again reiterates ninjas are not seen, work harder, like that kind of thing. So it kind of like still leaves that hanging, just like you said, like there's never quite an acceptance of like where they are, where they stand, who they are, all of those big questions that are kind of thrown up and kind of just left in the air, just never come down again.
Right. And that's kind of what makes this more disappointing, is the first movie gave it a nice solid foundation to like have the character arcs, and they start exploring the characters. And the second one, it's like, we need to make a buck as fast as possible. And so, we got this thing that people like, the TV show. And so we know that we want to get more kids' butts in the seats. And, frankly, it didn't work either, because, every movie slightly did less well than the previous one, but, still a huge hit, but not quite as huge, so, maybe in a different timeline, they did sort of do the similar story to this, but actually explored more character stuff. I think that's the biggest thing, honestly.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the Splinter stuff, because I realized I had forgotten to say anything about that. I completely agree. I think that, like, I love Splinter at the end of the movie where he's like watching the news and he's just like, idiots, and he like puts his hand on his head. But there's no lead-in scene for that in this movie. So like, if you were like me and 6 years old and obsessed with the Ninja Turtle stuff, and like, had watched the first one a billion times going into this one, it feels fine. But I would have liked a scene earlier in the movie where Splinter is talking about how like we, needs to be hidden, needs to be secret. And you've got ample opportunity. Like when he has them up on the roof, it's like, this is why we live in secret, because like they will take us and dissect us or some shit like that, just something to like set up a through line of the turtles trying to be secretive. Like, I think this is the appropriate movie for them to come out of the shadows somewhat, pardon me for referencing both a video game and a movie in the series, but like it makes sense that like they're more public in this movie. Like, more people have seen them by the end of this movie. That they go from being completely unknown to being like this urban legend of people being like, no, that was performers. No, those are real fucking turtles. Like, I think that's a cool like elevation of what they're doing with as characters in this franchise.
Can I just say, I'm sorry, I'm also sad that we don't get any more trench coats.
Yeah.
Because that was hilarious. Like, I know like we can't do beat for beat the first movie, but I think like trench coats are pretty like, I think anyone who's a fan of the Ninja Turtles knows that trench coats are used a lot. And I think it's hilarious. And I'm sad that they didn't show up at that first fight for their pizza in trench coats and then have to take them off.
Oh man, that would have been good. A nice shot callback to the first movie too.
Yeah.
Yeah, they all storm in their trench coats, and it's like, who are you guys? And then they drop it, and that's when they like leap up or something.
I think that was
Is that our pizza? I think that's our pizza.
Yeah.
Hey, let's help you out. Take off their trench coat.
Yeah, it would have been good if they made a comment like, we will 100% save every pizza guy or something like,
Yeah, some sort of callback to the wise man say, never pay full price for late pizza.
Yeah. But this is like, never let a pizza delivery man fall to villains, or I don't know.
Yeah, if the pizza delivery man falls, pizza you shall not have.
Right,
Yeah, so that's the weird part. Like, this movie has like a lot of like references to the previous one, but then like it would have been nice to have some returning jokes that were like striking ones from the first one. Like, there's so many like memorable lines from the first movie, and this one has some too. Like I said, like I quote like Shredder talking to Toka and Raza all the time, but that itself is like kind of similar to what Tatsu says in the first movie. So like, yeah, the first movie just has more of a real story, and this one is more like it's fine. It like again, there's cool set pieces. Like everyone looks great. Shredder's too purple, but that's like kind of its own thing.
He has a beautiful cape.
He does. Oh my god!
I'm super down for the beautiful cape because he had a beautiful cape in the first
Yeah.
one, but like he's like sparkly purple in this, and I'm like, that's it. I think it's the fact that it's glittery. So
Yeah.
that's what
I
gets me. He's a ninja
everything's
lord
a
living
little-
in a dumpster, but he's wearing glittery purple.
It's because people throw out glitter and glitter gets on everything.
Yeah.
Case, once glitter gets on your suit, you're not going to get it off. It's not his fault that
That's
someone threw out stuff from Michael's.
When he was in the garbage truck, he didn't really get smashed. He got out of the way, but his cape got smashed into a glitter dump, and then it fused together. I mean,
Yeah. Headcanon approved.
it suddenly made him fabulous.
Oroko, shocking. Yeah. So I'm so glad to revisit this movie, and I'm so glad to speculate on what could have been done because like there's certainly good questions on that. I think that the tight timetable for this movie made some of the more elaborate kind of suggestions impossible. Like Baxter Stockman with the Mousers would have been really cool, but that's not the movie that comes out 11 months later. That's the movie that comes out 2 years later. You know, like I don't think it should have been a big gap, but they wanted to get this one out immediately. And to be fair, 11 months later, we were chomping at the bit for the next Turtles movie. So makes sense.
Your children
Like,
had short attention spans. I can't wait another.
Well,
2
and
years.
that's the problem with the franchise. Like, you know, it was a kids focused franchise, which means that like you need to keep them into it. You need to keep them interested, and eventually the next thing's going to come. And if you are the studio producing this, you want to get as much of that juice out as you can before the squeeze stops happening. And by the time you get to Turtles 3, that's when interest had started to wane. But I have a thesis about Turtles movies, which is that there is no bad Ninja Turtles movie. I have enjoyed every single one of them. Even the first Bay Turtles, like it's still fun and fine. It's just like, yeah, the designs are stupid.
Tank Turtles. Yeah.
You know, Turtles 3 is like, yeah, there's a lot that we could say about it because we did. And you should check out our Turtles 3 episode from way back in the early era of the show because we go into great detail about that. But this movie is fun and fine. And Mike, I'm so glad that you brought it.
Thanks. Yeah, I really enjoyed
thank
talking
you.
about it with you.
Yeah, so if people want to find you, follow you, check out stuff that you... I know that Sacred Cows is on hiatus, but, you know, like, what was it and where can they find you and who are you?
Okay. Well, if you were listening to the beginning of the show, I'm Mike Urban, and I am the on hiatus host of Sacred Cows Tonight. It's a movie and TV review podcast. It actually went through like 2 eras, one where we were very heavy researching and one where we changed formats to be more like a talk show, but also talking about movies. And there's episodes there. We actually, spoilers, did an episode about the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movies. We actually did several. We've done other movies that you might like. But our big gimmick is that we always do sketches both about the movies and sort of in an MST3K style about our own silly meta plot about being bad podcasters, which kind of actually has sort of an ending before we temporarily laid down the show. But yeah, you can find that on any podcast platform of choice. And you can also follow that on @SacredCowsPod on Twitter. I'm on Twitter @WhiteMorph, and I tweet about random things there, mostly whatever dumb thing I'm interested in or commenting on other people's jokes. So maybe I'll podcast again soon, but for now I'm a podcaster at large. So if you're interested, maybe I'll do your show.
Well, I'm so glad to finally get you on. Like I said, it's been great getting to know you over the years. So it's been too long.
Thanks. And great getting to know you. And Sam, it's been great to meet you for the first time.
Yeah, wonderful.
Yeah, Sam, where can they find you and follow you if they happen to enjoy this episode?
So they can find me here on Another Pass, and they can sometimes maybe catch a glimpse of me on the Discord if I remember that it exists. And then they can't find me anywhere else because I will be buying several different types of pizza, taking them into the sewers to find my Ninja Turtle friends with napkins for the correct fold, with the correct grace. But if you have any complaints about anything I said or just want to talk about Ninja Turtles or giant monsters, you can find Case at.
Well, you can find me on Twitter at Case Aiken, where you can come at me for my opinion that the turtles are right. You should put sprinkles on your slices of pizza. I think that just makes sense. Obviously. Go for it.
That is worse than pineapples, but
it's a sweet and savory combination that is just chef's kiss right there. So you can find me there at Case Aiken. You can find me on Instagram at Quetzalcoatl5 because I am a Legion of Superheroes nerd and a mythology nerd. You can find the show on Twitter at Another Pass, where you can find out updates about what's coming on. As a side note, we haven't talked about this. This is our 151st episode. So when this drops, we are in a new era of the show, in that a lot of podcast players don't only let you go back so far, and also it's been a long time, and Sam wasn't a part of the first 100 episodes.
That's true.
It's crazy that Sam has been a part of the show for 2 years now.
That is also crazy, yes.
Yeah, time just flies on that one. But so starting next week, we are going to be releasing old episodes, but with our commentary at the beginning and end, kind of the way that we did for the Another Pass at Another Pass for the Star Wars movies.
I love it.
Where, because those were on a different show. Those were soft pilots that were on the Certain POV podcast that launched this show, but weren't actually a part of it. So we're going to be going back and doing those on the off weeks between episodes. So if you're wondering why there's an episode in your feed next time for a thing that we already talked about, it's because we're going back and getting Sam's thoughts on it and seeing if I've changed my thoughts about it, and just commentary on like where the show was, did I know how to edit audio yet when we made this episode? Spoiler alert for the first 10. No. So check that out. It's going to be fun. We're going to have good conversations about it. I might be doing some trimming if there's spots that are just like dead air, like if it's too much of a tangent.
Yeah,
so
good
that
idea.
It's not, and there will be new material for us to talk about both at the beginning and end of the episodes. So check those out, even if you did listen to them. But I also know that like it's not easy. Like Libsyn, or at least like on my Pocket Cast on my phone, I can't go back to the first episode of the show. Like it only goes back so far. So we wanted to make those accessible, and we thought that would be a good way for us to like have second thoughts about some of these movies. So that'll be starting next week. And you can find that at certainpov.com or wherever you get your podcasts, just like this show and just like so many other great shows on our network, such as Screen Snark, which is a wonderful casual conversation that our editor Matt and their host Rachel Quirky Schenk have with cool guests all the time. It's a fun time. They have amazing people that they bring on, and they talk about the movies that influence them, and then just like what their lives are like, and why do those things, like what do those things make them think about their lives, and like what does it say about their lives. So it's really fun conversation. So check that out. Check out all the other great shows at certainpov.com. Check out our Discord server. There is a link all over our website and in the descriptions of all of our videos and all that. Come share sneak peeks check out sneak peeks for upcoming episodes. Check out memes that we're all sharing. Like, just chat with us. Like, we're nice. We don't bite. It's a fun community. Check that out. And then tune in for the next episode, the next proper episode, because the next episode that's dropping in this feed will be us talking about Return of the Jedi, because that was our first episode of the show. But the next actual episode of the show, Sam, what is coming up?
Well, next time we'll be talking about Highlander 2, The Quickening. But until then, if you enjoyed this, pass it on.
Thanks for listening to Certain Point of View's Another Pass podcast. Don't miss an episode. Just subscribe and review the show on iTunes. Just go to certainpov.com.
Another Pass is a Certain POV production. Our hosts are Sam Alicea and Case Aiken. The show is edited by Matt Storm. Our logo and episode art is by Case Aiken. Our intro theme is by Vin Macri, and our outro theme is by Matt Brogan.
It is definitely helpful. We weren't really doing it when we first started having Matt come on, and at a certain point he was like, "Could you please do something for me?"
Poor Matt. Look how abused you were. I mean, Case
I
not
just torture
thinking
Matt.
about you.
Yeah.
Just like, unlike me, a good friend stops by, plays with Otis, all that stuff.
It is good to have an editor, and it's good to treat them well.
Mm-hmm.
I'll say the first part's good.
CPOV. CertainPOV.com.